This book is about truth, knowledge, and a call to action. Within these pages are numerous citations from credible sources ranging from patents to declassified reports disclosed under Freedom of Information Act disclosures from the United States government itself, reports from the United Nations, and whistleblower and witness reports. Through detailed analysis, case studies, and first-hand accounts, this book seeks to illuminate the systemic use of surveillance, torture, and non-lethal weapons to target individuals and communities to silence dissent against the activities of the modern-day military-industrial complex. It will uncover how these tools have been deployed to silence dissent, undermine democracy, and prioritize corporate and state interests over human rights. This book bridges documented evidence with critical analysis to uncover patterns of control and silencing in the modern era. The phenomena of harassment, disinformation, and covert technologies are examined in the context of both governmental and corporate strategies to exert influence and maintain dominance. Why? Because the people have a right to know. Because governments that actively misinform citizens can't be trusted and need to be reformed or voted out of office. And most importantly, because people who commit torture and murder should be held accountable and stopped. The book covers the history of environmental activists being targeted, murdered, more than 1,700, or silenced, as documented by organizations like Global Witness. Almost 2,000 land and environmental defenders were killed between 2012 and 2022 while protecting our planet. The truth of psyops, torture, and non-consensual experimentation, including the development and deployment of non-lethal weapons such as V2K and DU, is also revealed. These weapons have been developed by the DoD Non-Lethal Weapons Program under the Joint Intermediate Force Capabilities Office and other government and private sector entities. The book documents the effect of these weapons on targeted individuals, as well as information on previously secret programs such as Project Pandora and Project Bizarre. The infamous MK-Ultra program is a stark example of how the US government has conducted non-consensual experiments under the guise of national security. Similarly, the Tuskegee experiments reveal the depth of systemic racism and medical ethics violations perpetrated in the name of science. Cases like Havana syndrome, a condition attributed to exposure to DEWs, have affected diplomats and intelligence personnel. Reports from the US Department of National Intelligence Executive Summary Anomalous Health Incidents, AHIs, affecting US government personnel suggest that these phenomena are not isolated incidents but part of a larger unsettling pattern. Psychological operations, or psyops, have long been a tool of governments and corporations to manipulate public perception and control behavior. These tactics, combined with advanced technologies, have evolved into a sophisticated arsenal that can influence minds, destroy lives, and erode democracy. The victims often find themselves isolated, labeled as delusional, or ignored by authorities, perpetuating a cycle of invisibility and silence. The dark nexus of the modern-day military-industrial complex, consisting of the military contractors, the fossil fuel industry, big tech, and covert government entities, explores how power and profit intersect to the detriment of humanity. Case studies and Freedom of Information Act releases reveal the clandestine activities of government agencies. This includes the CIA's role in overthrowing governments and starting wars in service to the fossil fuel industry and the military-industrial complex, as well as engaging in unethical experimentation. The pharmaceutical industry's reliance on petrochemical byproducts has led to medications with harmful side effects. This connection is frequently underreported, as detailed in critical analyses found in medical journals by the physicians and researchers brave enough to speak up. International conventions like the United Nations Convention Against Torture and the Geneva Conventions are designed to safeguard human rights. Yet, as this book will demonstrate, enforcement mechanisms are often inadequate and require reform and enforcement. Other international legal frameworks attempt to prohibit such violations, but often fall short. Organizations such as the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights and the non-profit People Against Covert Torture and Surveillance International are fighting to stop the torment and illegal behavior. And this is how all these facts intertwine. This is not a conspiracy theory book. This is a conspiracy fact book. This is a factual recounting of the truth and an evidence-driven examination of mass murder, torture, advanced non-lethal weaponry, and systemic abuse. Each chapter delves into a specific element: non-lethal weapons, covert surveillance, the murder of more than 1,700 climate activists, the fossil fuel industry's toxic legacy, and the growing influence of big tech in manipulating public thought. The book exposes hidden systemic abuses through reports from the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights and whistleblower accounts. It examines military-industrial deception, covert technological advancements, non-consensual experiments, and collusion between the fossil fuel industry, governments, and intelligence agencies. These issues, though frequently dismissed or obscured, are critical to know so humanity can collectively create a better world together. A critical focus is how powerful industries manipulate public perception. The denial, disinformation, and doublespeak big oil's evolving efforts to avoid accountability for climate change report by the House Committee on Oversight and Accountability. Democrats and Senate Committee on the Budget reveals fossil fuel companies' long history of deception. The report states, Big Oil's deception campaign evolved from explicit denial of the basic science underlying climate change to deception, disinformation, and doublespeak. This manipulation has stalled climate action as companies prioritize profits over the long-term survival of humanity by harassing activists, funding misleading research, and lobbying against regulations. This propaganda has been refined over decades. Psychological operations, or PSYOPs, have long been used by military and intelligence agencies to shape public perceptions, influence behavior, and disrupt adversaries. From World War I propaganda aimed at swaying public opinion, as captured in how the US government used propaganda to sell Americans on World War I, to disinformation efforts such as Russia's 2016 US election interference, as captured in Report on the Investigation into Russian Interference in the 2016 Presidential Election, Volume 2, to subtle forms of psychological manipulation aimed at destabilizing dissent. These strategies remain central to state control. Disinformation campaigns like these serve as a linchpin in the strategies of control exercised by powerful entities. Disinformation campaigns undermine democracy and public trust. State-sponsored misinformation, digital media manipulation, and suppression of dissent all contribute to a controlled narrative and undermine democratic processes. This book sheds light on the tools and technologies employed to control narratives, suppress truths, and marginalize those who challenge the status quo. The rise of big tech adds another dimension to this control. Congressional hearings have shown how platforms like Google, Facebook, and YouTube prioritize profit over truth, enabling mass manipulation, misinformation, and social engineering. Their influence shapes discourse, limits visibility of critical information, and reinforces systemic narratives. This book explores how these tools function, from social media disinformation to algorithmic bias, as highlighted by Tristan Harris in his TED Talk, how a handful of tech companies control billions of minds every day. Congressional hearings have also revealed how these platforms prioritize profit over truth, creating a new frontier for mass manipulation, disinformation, and societal influence. Non-consensual human experimentation, a dark and illegal side of scientific research, demonstrates the extent to which ethics can be sidelined in pursuit of power or knowledge. The history of non-consensual human experimentation, from the Tuskegee syphilis experiment as documented by the CDC in About the Untreated Syphilis Study at Tuskegee, to MK-Ultra as documented by the CIA FOIA Reading Room Project MK-Ultra, which has been extensively documented in declassified CIA files and independent investigations, and saw the CIA conduct experiments involving LSD and sensory deprivation on unwitting participants, leading to long-term psychological damage, to covert radiation experiments and beyond. This book examines the human cost of such endeavors. These violations of trust and dignity have not only left scars on the individuals subjected to these trials, but have also raised fundamental questions about accountability and oversight in scientific research conducted under government directives. Even APA members have had a hand in this kind of illegal torture in recent years. From the development and misuse of non-lethal weapons such as voice-to-skull, V2K technology, and directed energy weapons, DWs, to the well-documented histories of surveillance, covert harassment, and human experimentation, this book offers a deep dive into activities of entities on the verge of destroying our civilization. It examines the tactics of governmental agencies that target dissenters, whistleblowers, and activists, using historical case studies such as Martin Luther King Jr. and modern examples like Julian Assange. Edward Snowden's revelations about NSA surveillance in the NSA files decoded by The Guardian and the persecution of whistleblowers illustrate how these organizations are violating our human and civil rights. These tools of torture and influence, combined with government surveillance programs exposed by whistleblowers like Edward Snowden and the harassment of dissenters like Julian Assange, illustrate how modern technology has become a weapon of psychological and societal control. These accounts reveal a legacy of treating human lives as expendable in the pursuit of power, a dark legacy that continues today, shielded by denials and disinformation campaigns. The abuses don't stop with technology, lies, and illegal research. The book also traces the origins of the military-industrial complex and its long-standing collaboration with intelligence agencies and the fossil fuel industry, showcasing how this nexus has fueled global conflicts, destabilized democracies, and perpetuated misinformation. The military-industrial complex, a term popularized by President Dwight D. Eisenhower, refers to the corrupt relationship between governments, defense contractors, the fossil fuel industry, and the military establishment. From the rise of petrochemicals to the toxic legacy of pharmaceuticals derived from fossil fuel byproducts, we'll uncover the hidden histories that are often sanitized or ignored. In doing so, the book will highlight the lasting consequences of these power plays, environmental destruction, and the deaths of countless activists who dared to resist, health crises, and the erosion of human rights. Despite robust legal frameworks like the Geneva Conventions and the UN Convention Against Torture, or UNCAT, enforcement is inconsistent. Article 1 of UNCAT defines torture as the intentional infliction of severe pain or suffering, whether physical or mental, for purposes such as obtaining information, punishment, or intimidation. This prohibition is non-derogable, meaning it applies under all circumstances, including during states of war or national emergency. The United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture reports in Interim Report of the Special Rapporteur on Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, or Degrading Treatment or Punishment widespread non-compliance globally, citing systemic issues in enforcing these laws effectively. The use of directed energy weapons, linked to Havana syndrome, exemplifies how new technologies are weaponized covertly. As highlighted in unclassified and declassified reports from the House and Senate, these technologies are often used covertly, leading to physical and psychological harm without leaving visible evidence, complicating accountability. The infamous Havana syndrome, a mysterious affliction linked to directed energy attacks, has been detailed in reports such as the U.S. House Intelligence Committee's unclassified assessment on anomalous health incidents, revealing a much larger strategy of weaponizing technology to control, silence, and manipulate individuals. For example, findings from the unclassified investigating the intelligence community's conclusions on anomalous health incidents. Is the intelligence community hiding the real reason for this phenomenon? Interim report by Chairman Rick Crawford of the Subcommittee on the Central Intelligence Agency of the House, Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, U.S. House of Representatives. This report sheds light on directed energy weaponry and its use against civilians. According to the report, directed energy systems can disrupt biological functions without physical evidence, a characteristic that makes such weapons particularly insidious in covert operations. The findings highlight the dual-use nature of these technologies, developed under the pretext of military applications, but increasingly deployed in civilian contexts for surveillance and harassment. The implications of such technologies extend beyond individual victims, raising broader ethical and regulatory concerns. Victims often find themselves isolated as disinformation campaigns seek to discredit their experiences. Key insights are drawn from reports, documents, and disclosures such as the harassment techniques, include document from the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, which meticulously outlines psychological and technological tactics used to disorient and control individuals. For instance, victims have reported anchoring techniques where many possible rationales are planted to keep the victim confused, creating a cycle of destructive thoughts. Another widely reported tactic is the use of V2K, or voice-to-skull, a technology documented in patents and numerous reports as tools enabling the planting of subliminal messages and images directly in a victim's mind, often with the intent to provoke fear or paranoia. These weapons exist, as evidenced by the list of more than 70 patents from the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights website, and the even longer list contained in this book. Another critical source is the paper presented at the International Studies Association's Austin conference, titled From PSYOPs to Neurowar, What Are the Dangers? This paper delves into the implications of neuroweapons and psychological warfare. The document discusses how advances in neuroscience have made it possible to manipulate emotions, thoughts, and behavior through non-lethal means. The paper warns that the unregulated use of these technologies risks creating a battlefield of the mind, where the integrity of free will itself is at stake. This emerging field of neurowarfare calls for urgent international oversight to safeguard the integrity of free will and individual autonomy. Together, these resources map the structures of power and their profound impact on individuals and societies. For example, victims subjected to harassment techniques often describe experiences such as noise campaigns, causing sleep deprivation, psychological gaslighting, mobbing and baiting, and entrapment. These practices are designed to create a sense of fear, intimidation, isolation, and helplessness, often culminating in psychological breakdowns. By linking these individual accounts to broader institutional behaviors, this book provides a comprehensive understanding of how covert harassment becomes a tool of state and corporate control. The unifying thread throughout this book is the human cost of these practices. Whether examining the trauma inflicted on individuals subjected to non-consensual experiments and retaliation, the societal divisions exacerbated by propaganda, or the casualties of wars fought for economic gain, this book emphasizes the importance of accountability and truth. The book challenges readers to question the narratives they are presented with and to consider the ethical implications of actions carried out in the shadows of public scrutiny. By doing so, this exploration not only uncovers hidden truths, but also seeks to amplify the voices of those who have been silenced or marginalized by these covert operations. This book seeks to contribute to the ongoing discourse about freedom, human dignity, and the forces that undermine them. It is essential to recognize that these values are often under threat from systemic abuses, covert operations, and deliberate disinformation campaigns. Using carefully sourced materials from whistleblowers, declassified documents, and investigative reports, the text aims to inspire dialogue, action, and awareness. This book is not merely an exposé, it is a call to action, a demand for accountability, and a blueprint for resistance against systemic oppression. By documenting the misuse of power and the systemic violations of human rights, the goal is to educate and empower readers to challenge these injustices. Each chapter presents meticulously researched narratives supported by verifiable sources, including declassified records from institutions like the CIA and House and Senate oversight committees, and reports and evidence from organizations like the United Nations. These accounts are enriched by independent watchdog organizations such as Amnesty International, which offer crucial third-party verification of systemic abuses. This book highlights the importance of vigilance and accountability in addressing these systemic abuses. By exposing the hidden systems that perpetuate oppression and disinformation and are responsible for millions of deaths, it invites readers to engage critically with the forces shaping our world. It emphasizes the moral and ethical imperative to demand truth, challenge narratives, and advocate for justice in an increasingly complex and controlled global environment. By revealing the underlying mechanisms of manipulation, it seeks to empower readers to challenge disinformation, demand truth, and advocate for justice. Through a combination of personal testimonies, investigative journalism, and scholarly research, this book encourages a collective reckoning with the ethical and human costs of unchecked power. In a world where power operates in shadows and control is exerted through invisible hands, how do we separate truth from deception? How do we confront the hidden connections between technological advancements, military interests, and the exploitation of human rights? How do we confront the uncomfortable realities of institutions built on secrecy, exploitation, and violence with the truth? Once you know the facts, you will realize this is not a conspiracy theory, but in fact documents a wide-ranging real conspiracy, a criminal conspiracy against all of humanity. The book is meant to inform and raise awareness so an informed electorate can then hold these criminals accountable. The truth matters. Awareness matters. Rule of law and justice matter. In addition to documenting the criminal activities underway all over the world, the book will explore the international legal frameworks that are supposed to prevent such atrocities, highlighting both their successes and failures. The book will discuss how institutions like the United Nations and human rights organizations have documented these abuses and what more needs to be done to hold perpetrators accountable.